Welcome to the Equipped Agronomy podcast, where we bridge that gap between seeding equipment and agronomy, presented to you by Bourgault Industries. My name's Curtis DeGoyer, Agronomy Manager here in St. Bruce, Saskatchewan. And today we're going to do something a little bit different we haven't done before. I've got an expert online with me here, Mr. Jim Vannett.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, Curtis. My name is Jim Vannett. I am a territory sales manager in the USA with a territory of North and South Dakota, Western Minnesota. Previously, I had Colorado and Kansas as part of that territory, and I'm also the U.S. operations leader.
So you're kind of the big dog down there in the U.S. now.
If that's what you want to call me, I guess, yeah.
Fair enough. Well, no, it's great to have you on here. We're going to go through a few things related to Coulter drills. That's going to be the topic of today. Usually I like to surprise the guest, but I kind of, let the cat out of the bag on that one with you. We're going to talk about our different openers that we have and then how it kind of relays into the agronomic aspect of it. Why would we choose one over the other? Because I think we get that question quite a few times. We've got a few different offerings that we have. And personally myself, I don't really have a ton of experience with disc drills, Coulter drills, whatever you want to call them. So that's where I thought, you know what, you've got a little bit more experience, a lot more experience on them. And maybe you could bring up some different scenarios where one is better than the other, let's say, or why a guy would choose one over the other. Does that sound fair?
That sounds perfect. I'm looking forward to it.
Right on. Well, I think the first thing we're going to do is just kind of lay out a couple of the different options that we have. And I think the first one we'll start with is one, actually, I think it was our original, well, pretty much the original disc Coulter drill that we had. If you don't take into account, maybe I think we had a drill that had some banders we used for seeders at one point. I think that was like the 5725. Is that something like that, eh?
Yep.
Yeah, we won't dive into that one there. But we've got our 3710 Coulter drill was our first one. And that, I would say we relabeled that, and we'll label it this way, is a PLW, a ParaLink Walking opener, right? PLW?
No, that's correct. Yep.
And that one we've had for quite a few years. Probably, I don't know.
10 plus for sure.
10 plus for sure. Yeah, exactly. And then that one kind of moved into the 3720. Maybe what was the difference between the 10 and the 20?
That's a great question, Curtis. And I get asked that question quite often. And the easiest way for me to explain it to most people is geometry wise with the opener, it's exactly the same opener on the 3720 as it was the 3710. The 3720 is when we migrated to needle bearings in those parallel arms from the bushings. And the 3720 is when we introduced the high float and the 70-foot Coulter drill. So very much the same opener, just some added enhancements.
Right. And nothing too much then on seed placement. Seed placements kind of stayed the same. It was just more, bigger, better, bigger tires, differences in mechanics of it. But the actual geometries never changed on those openers. Yeah,
the geometry has stayed the same. However, if we visit with some of our engineer friends, they'll tell us that in those 10 plus years, there's been 12 plus different iterations of the seed boot scraper. And so we've gotten to our current version, which is the LDX scraper version.
Right.
So there has definitely been enhancements all through those years of progression.
Right. All right. Well, we won't ask the engineers anything. I won't drag them down on this episode. It seems like I always got to throw something at them. They're doing a great job. We got a great drill now. So great opener.
They are for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So we got this PLW, and we're obviously going to go into another one right away. But the biggest thing with this one, I would say, we've got this walking axle. And so the walking axle on the back end of it kind of is what it sounds like. It walks between the cleaner wheel and then the packer wheel on the back. And that's where we get our depth setting from. And so there's pin on the back, and that's, it walks through the ground, and the scraper's the discs in front a little bit of where that is. And so that, I guess, is meant to help kind of dampen, I suppose, the depth as you're going through the field.
That's exactly how I would explain it. It stabilizes that opener. You don't get a lot of ground chatter, right?
Right.
And so you have a 60-40 split between the packer wheel and the gauge wheel as far as the weight that is bearing on the ground. And it really does do a great job of buffering some of them fluctuations in the contour of the ground.
Okay, so that's a great way to remember it. It's the walking between, the cleaner and the packer. And we won't get into the fact that you can, pin it up and stuff like that, make it kind of like a 1-to-1, but that is an option there as well. Another thing with this opener, I would say too, that it's probably important that this one offers is the ability to have a disc wing scraper. So making this into a dual chute opener itself.
That's correct. Yeah. With the disc wing scraper, you can truly do the Trimac configuration that you can do on some of the dual shank machines and put those 3 different products in 3 different locations in the soil profile.
Right.
So you can get that agronomic benefit. However, it does come with a bit of a cost or a burden, and that is on the tractor. It really just requires a significant additional amount of horsepower.
So let's not even say just the Trimax. Let's just say it's a double chute drill. Would you say that disc wing scraper adds quite a bit more requirement for horsepower over the LDX, which is the low disturbance scraper, just a single chute?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
Yes. I would say an additional 25% to the horsepower draw.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it does take quite a bit more on that disc wing scraper side, especially at any speed, I would imagine too, right?
Yeah, and if you think about it, right, with a disc drill, you're cutting a pretty clean, narrow slot in the soil. But now we're going to take this disc wing and we're going to not only cut that slot, but now we're going to make an inch wide shelf on the side of that slot.
Right.
Not with a shank, not with a plow, but with the scraper leading edge. So it definitely requires more ponies.
And that's the thing with the disc drill in general. It just kind of doesn't move stuff out of the way per se. It kind of just squeezes stuff out of the way. It lifts a little bit, but it just kind of, wedges its way in, which obviously takes a little bit of power to do that. So, okay, so that's the PLW opener. So that's one of our offering. That one is always on our 37, either 20 or 3725. We'll come back to the 25 right away and the difference on it. But the other opener I want to talk about is the PLR, ParaLink Row opener, PLR opener. And that one's found on our 3820. I don't know if I'll ask this question to you, if you'll have an answer on this one. Maybe I will. Why did we do an opener and a drill name difference there?
That's a question that I wouldn't be able to answer. But
Okay.
There's definitely an easy way to distinguish the two. If you have a 3820, you're not going to have a PLW. If you have a 3720 or 3725, you're not going to have a PLR opener. So
Okay, so we can put a pin on that one then. It's PLW 3720, 3725, the PLR 3820.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, correct.
And
100%.
So that's probably a good one. So the biggest difference on this opener then, the depth setting on it is just a T-handle, and then that gauge wheel is right on the disc itself. So it's the gauge wheel and the cleaner wheel kind of together. So
yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong though, but this is very much so, we'll say like our friends in the field there, the John Deere openers kind of style, right? Every time someone comes and takes a look at the PLR, if I'm at the booth or something, they're like, "Oh, this looks very similar to the John Deere."
It is at your first visible glance. It's only when you dig a little deeper that you can see the Bourgault-isms, if you will, that set it aside from the other. One of them being the compound angle that John Deere or the green side of things doesn't offer. And the second is an actual, packer wheel versus a stitch type closing wheel. So we do offer a couple of things along with operating it on parallel arm. So that parallel arm maintains your attack angle of that seed boot scraper. So your precision placement stays where you want it to be.
Okay, yeah. And when you talk about the compound angle, so of course a disc drill goes, if you look straight down on it, there's a vertical angle, but then, and that's where most disc drills stop, versus ours, and both of our openers do this, right? It kind of tilts, if you look from the back, it kind of tilts up almost. Would that be a best way to describe it, or is there a different way to describe that one?
No, that's a pretty good way to describe it. There is, however, a difference in that compound angle from the PLW to the PLR, right?
Right.
So from straight, we open that disc up by 5 degrees, the same amount on both, or not on both, 7 degrees on the PLR, 5 degrees on the PLW.
Right.
And then when we tip like you were talking about, that's the same. It's 10 degrees on both openers.
Okay.
And we put opposing disc angles on the left and right side of the unit, which creates its own suction or downforce because of that compound angle.
Right. Yeah, it kind of moves and lifts. Okay, so that's on both. But let's go back to the PLR. Depth setting on the gauge wheel, the T-handle. Another distinguishing thing with this one here is the fact that we use this one, and would this be right to say the reason that we did bring this out was so that we could use it with our air planter, our singulation. That was
correct.
Yeah, one of the reasons, right? And so you can't get the air planter option on the PLW. You can only get it on the PLR.
That's correct.
However, just like we were talking about the disc wing scraper, the double chute scraper that's on the PLW, you cannot get that on the PLR now. So
that's correct as well.
So that might be, maybe one of the biggest distinguishing things, the first thing a guy goes to as far as, hey, I want to use singulation. Well, this is your option. Oh, I want double chute disc drill. Well, this is your option. Boom. That might be the easiest, call it, way to say go to this one versus that one.
And the other significant distinguishing difference between the two is on the 3725, you can get QDA.
Yeah, let's get into that now. Okay, so we've described the two. The PLW has the walking axle, so the depth setting is towards the back of the disc. Okay, and the PLR is right on the disc. So now that PLR follows to the ground, contours to the ground, disc and that gauge wheel are exactly the same spot as they're going through the field. So if we do anything with the frame, if we tilt it, lift it, doesn't matter, right?
Doesn't matter.
But to your point now, we go back to that PLW, which is our 3720, and now we're going to talk about the 3725 on the openers themselves. If we start adjusting that frame, we can play with depth.
That's right. Because our gauging point or our depth gauging point is not right at the disc, it's behind the disc blade. And just for comparison, if you're familiar with the PLX opener, the shank PLX opener, the distance from the shank to the gauge wheel is virtually the same as it is on a 3725. The distance from the boot in the trench where it's dropping the seed to that unified gauging point between the gauge wheel and the packer wheel, that distance is almost exactly the same on a PLX as it is on a PLW.
Okay.
So it's an easy reference.
Yeah. Okay. So again, like the PLX, then the opener, the frame going up and down doesn't matter, but we can tilt the frame.
That's right.
And that's how we get our quick depth adjust. We tilt the back of the frame. I guess it would be up. If we tilted it up, every single opener now would go deeper.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. And so you've been around disc drills quite a bit in general. Changing depth on a disc drill is probably the most fun job in the entire world.
Yeah. It's one that every disc drill owner looks forward to is making those depth adjustments throughout the season.
Right. And now you can tell a guy, hey, we can take 5 minutes, run around the outside of the drill, not get down in there, and we can change your depth. That's probably a big one. Can we get AccuSet on it? Well, is this as well? I don't know that actually.
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay.
We can put AccuSet on the 3725.
Right. And I guess just for everyone listening, the AccuSet is, you can do it with your phone or on the app, and it automatically senses the cylinders, I guess, always have a sensor in them, and you just tilt it, and it's as simple as touching it on your phone, adjust as you go.
That's correct. And then with Vic, we're going to be able to have it right on our operating screen and make those adjustments.
Even nicer. Okay. So I think we laid out the differences If someone's listening, maybe you can picture it. Probably best to go take a look. But those are the differences. Now, this is the question that I got for you here a little bit more. Conditions. I find that disc drills are either in, let's say, heavy clay areas, right? Let's say in the Red River Valley, something like that. Or disc drills also go into very light conditions, very sandy. We're using stripper headers. So I guess those are like two extremes, and it's kind of where these disc drills go. So throw it back to you here. Which one would you put in each condition, or does it matter per se on which one it goes in, or what's the distinguishing factor, I guess, if someone came up to you on that?
That's a great question. And I think if a person's familiar with a disc opener, whether it's the competitive machines, I think the comfort zone is pretty important. I have my own personal preferences, but my personal preferences aren't out farming. But I do think that the compound angle on both of these openers will help reduce soil movement. They'll reduce hairpinning because the compound angle is going to cut that residue very well. And they're both going to do a great job of placing seed in the bottom of that seed furrow.
Well, I'm gonna dive into it more though. I'm living in the Red River clay now, and I want to buy a Bourgault disc drill. Which one would you that sticky, heavy gumbo? Which would a guy go to first, do you think? Should he consider the 3820 first, or should he consider the 3720 or 25 first?
You're putting me on the spot, Curtis.
I love that.
I would say I've seen them both perform very well in those conditions, but if it was a no-till situation, heavy soil, I would definitely say the PLR, you're going to have a little bit more adjustment on that packer wheel to help close that furrow. So depending on if you were going to ever add singulation, that would also affect your decision. But I think the PLR does have a few more little tweaks that you can do with it to in those heavier soils,
right,
to make it close that furrow better.
Right, and that's what it all comes down to, is the furrow closing in that particular condition, right? Yeah, no, that's actually a good point. And then you also brought up another great one here, till versus no till, because that's usually a consideration as well. Are you working it up? So let's say now let's go to, if you are doing lots of tillage in that heavy gumbo, would the 3725 work just as good or better or worse?
I would prefer the 3725 in tilled soils.
Okay.
Because you're carrying the weight of the opener on two wheels, the gauge wheel or that cleaner wheel and the packer wheel.
Right.
You're spreading the surface area. You can go to a larger gauge wheel as well, from that narrow 3-inch all the way out to that 5.5-inch wide gauge wheel and the packer wheel. It's just going to give you a bigger support system for that opener and still allow you to do a great job placing that seed.
Okay. So I've also heard this term though too, bulldozing a little bit with that gauge wheel in really work ground that's probably maybe a little more powdery, right? Like it can't support it. And does that change kind of the talk then a little bit there too?
For sure, I would go with the PLW. And the reason why is because we can bridge the weight on those two openers, or on those two wheels. But if that's still not enough, you can take all of the weight off that gauge wheel, put that linkage pin in, and put all your weight on the packer wheel.
Right. It's
going to completely eliminate the bulldozing that would be happening. And I've had guys who do it and had tremendous luck. It does take a little bit of time to make that adjustment, but it's well worth it in the performance of the drill.
Okay. So, well, and again, like, not going to put it in stone. Oh, if you're no-till, go PLR. If you're tilled, go PLW. That's still, we're probably not going to give a black and white answer here, but it's something to kind of, maybe
for sure
point the guy at first. If we do flip it over to those dry conditions now, what do you have a preference on that? Really trying to maintain moisture. Is there anyone that kind of does better in those conditions?
I personally don't don't think there's a significant advantage of one over the other in my experience with both of the openers.
Right. Okay. So both good options in that one. Now, I would probably take a guess. So, I mean, obviously we talked about the depth setting and how much easier it is with the 3725. So now it probably gets guys looking at saying, well, if they both perform good in those conditions, how do I change my depth easier? PLW 3725 probably starts to, I guess, rise up a little bit more then.
Yeah. With that QDA, it's obviously a really nice feature because you can get that 3/4 of an inch from wherever you set your baseline at. You can adjust 3/4 of an inch.
Yeah. And yeah, 3/4 of an inch, you said up or down from that point? Or is it 3/4 total movement?
3/4 total. So depending on where you set your baseline, if you set it at the shallowest end, then you can add 3/4 inch of depth. Or if you had it in the middle, then you can go, 3/8 up or 3/8 down.
Okay. So yeah, probably enough to get you between canola to deeper into your cereals, right? If you wanted to go a little bit deeper, or as the year progresses, dries out a little bit more, you can just go around. Okay. Well, I think that kind of maybe gives guys a little bit something to chew on if we're looking at the disc drills. A couple other things wanted to touch on, the packing. And I know the openers are very different in packing. The PLW obviously rides on that packer wheel. That's how it sets its depth. Versus the PLR on the 3820, it's a spring tension to kind of close it. Is that fair? I guess that's maybe the closer. I guess it's got a trailing, like a wheel packer, or what do you call it inside the trench?
Well, I would call that the seed firming wheel. It firms firms that seed into the bottom of the trench, and then your packer wheel trails behind it. Now, the 3820 or the PLR opener, you do have the ability to turn that packer wheel from straight or at a little bit of an angle to help scrub that seed slot closed. Whereas on the PLW, you can move the packer wheel left or right on that spindle, but you can't turn it. So there's adjustability in both of them. Just the PLR does have a little bit more that you can tweak.
Right. And I think you're showing me in the field there the one time we were down in Kansas there, and you had turned it on one half of the drill, right? I think, and versus the other. Yeah, you could just see it.
Yep.
And that's the biggest thing is if you don't close that trench, well, then it just dries out and your seeds gonna have a tough time germinating with no moisture. So,
That's right.
On that, we also have a Packmaster Gauge Master system, and those are fancy words, but it automatically will adjust your pressure. And they're a little bit different on that as well then, I suppose. Because I think, how does that work then? I guess on the 3720, the PLW opener, it goes off that packer wheel. So it's kind of doing like a Packmaster. But how's it work then on the other one? It's not on the backpacker.
It's a load cell that actually is right where the T handle is on one opener. So it measures the downforce required to get to your cutting depth. So it's measuring the up force on the gauge wheel through the depth arm.
Right.
And then it's sending that information back to the monitor.
Right. And basically that as long as it's not zero, as long as you have some pressure on the gauge wheel, it means your disc is in the ground.
Right. So for example, if you went and you were in an average area of the field and it was just cutting really easy, and then you get to an area where it's packed quite hard, and that disc is having a tougher time penetrate, it's still going to try and measure on the bottom of the gauge wheel. So if the gauge wheel comes off the ground, it's just going to increase your hydraulic pressure down to force that disc into that depth. So it's a good option, and it does definitely perform well when you get that variability in the field.
Right. And that would be very similar to, say, what planters are doing, right? They got their on the gauge wheels. Now, right. To make the argument, they got one on every opener. I get that. There's probably a little bit of validity in that one, whereas we just have one on one opener for the whole drill. But
that's right.
It gives us at least into the areas, because if you just set your pressure and don't ever look back again, well, that'll be tough too, and you can't adjust it on the go.
Yeah, exactly. But it does also give you the opportunity then to record an as-applied packing map and kind of overlay it with some other things and confirm some different features in your field that you may be questioning, and maybe it's just due to harder compaction. So
fair enough.
It can be used as an additional tool.
Right. Well, I think we've gone through a few things. PLW is a 3720/25. PLR is a 3820. Yeah, I don't know, Jim, was there any other things you kind of wanted to chat about it, or on the mechanical side, or ideally, I guess, if there's any agronomic things you had on there? But
I think just for clarification, want to make sure that you're aware that the 3720 can only be the disc wing. The 3725 cannot ever have the disc wing scraper. It's just the PLDX low disturbance scraper.
Oh, I
make sure that
know that. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so you cannot get QDA with the PLW with the disc wing scraper. So there's a little bit of a differentiation, and that's because we're changing the angle of that frame, like we talked about. We don't want to change the angle of that scraper in the ground, because then it's not going to perform the way it was designed. Right.
Fair enough. And of course, we can get banders on all of this too, I should say, on all these openers, all these drills. Like, that's doesn't change.
Yeah.
Row spacing, we can get down to 7.5-inch spacing.
Yeah, there are some limitations there as far as 7.5-inch spacing with mid-row banders.
Right.
There are some limitations just because of frame weight. We can't do that on a 70-foot machine. Right. We can do a 60-foot 7.5 with banders. But it gets pretty darn busy when you get 7.5 with mid-row banders. So
yeah, that gets it gets a lot of weight on there. It's basically having a whole bunch of there's a lot of disc openers on that point in time.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
when
those options are available on our website or in our catalog.
Yeah. And it comes down to, I guess, any kind of fertilizer placement wise then too. I mean, we got a narrow disc. If you're using it without the double chute on it, just a low disturbance scraper, we always got to pay attention to how much fertilizer going in the seed row. And then we're splitting some off into the banders. And, that's a whole nother thing we talk about a lot on different things, on different episodes here. So won't get too much into that one with this, but, the same kind of fertilizer placement still applies to a single seed knife, single seed disc, and then you got your banders out there. So good. Well, I think with that one, Jim, I might say we'll call her there, unless again there's anything else. But
no, I think that covered it, and I sure appreciate the time.
Right on. Well, I appreciate you coming on here, and hope to meet up with you in person soon.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you.